Alright, this is going to be spiritual warfare. This is technically video 6, but this is the second part of my series on spiritual warfare. Which the first part, if you've been following along, we were talking about basically looking at the enemies that we fight against. And the three enemies that we fight against is the devil, the world or the world system, and our own flesh. So these three enemies we battle against in this spiritual war. So in this part of my series, this section, I want to talk about, instead of talking about the enemies that we fight against, I want to talk about the king that we fight for. And I think this is very important, knowing the reason we're in this battle and why do we want to engage the enemy, why do we want to fight, who are we actually fighting for, if not just ourselves, but there's a king that we fight for, and so we're going to look at him today. So, typically most soldiers throughout history, whether it was back in the day with kings and kingdoms that they were fighting for with swords and shields, or whether it's today soldiers that fight for presidents or kings or countries and governments, soldiers typically fight for a king or a president or a government that they don't even really know, that they've never met personally, and that certainly doesn't know them. Typically, most kings and presidents don't know every soldier personally that fights for them or that they ask to fight for them. Most soldiers just do as they're told, without even realizing the actual reasons that they are engaging the enemy, except for they're just fighting for their country, or they're fighting for their king, or they're fighting for their president, or the government, or their nation, or whatever it is, but they don't even know half the time the actual reason that they're in this battle that they're fighting. They're just doing as they're told. But we fight for a king that we personally know. But even more than that, a king that personally knows us and that wants a relationship with us. One that lives within us, that serves us, that died for us, that lives for us, that lived for us, that loves us, intercedes for us, pleads for us, that suffered for us and bled for us. This is the king that we fight for. We fight for a king that left his kingdom, to come to the battlefield and rescue us from the enemy. We fight for a king that isn't worried about keeping his kingdom all to himself, but he wants all of his soldiers to reign with him. That's our king. We fight for a king that shares his inheritance with us. One that fights alongside us, and one that actually wins the victory for us. So during this teaching, I want to try and open up your eyes and help you see our king the way that I do. And so first off, we're going to look at John chapter 1 and get a bit of insight from the Apostle John on who this king is that we fight for. He says, starting in verse 1, "In the beginning the Word already existed." And the Word is Jesus. When he's talking about the Word, this is Jesus. This is our king. "In the beginning the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God." Okay, he existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. So God sent a man named John the Baptist to tell about the light so that everyone could believe because of his testimony. Okay? So John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light, the true light, Jesus Christ. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Okay, so this king that we fight for left his kingdom, left his throne to come down here and come into our world, into this battlefield. Real quick, Philippians chapter 2, verse 6 through 11 says, "Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges and took on the humble position of a slave, and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross. Therefore, God elevated him to the highest place of honor and gave him the name above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So, leaving his kingdom behind, God left the heavenly realm where he ruled the universe and where he lives in unapproachable light to come down into darkness and dwell amongst us. Um, John chapter 1, again, continuing here in verse 10, it says that he came into the very world that he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion and plan, but a birth that comes from God. So the Word became flesh, the Word became human, and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. So Jesus, our King, left his heavenly dwelling, his heavenly place, and came down and gave up all his divine privileges to live amongst us, to live in this dark world. This world is darkness, but in God there is no darkness. So imagine what that means really. If there is nothing but good in God, well, then he probably wasn't too excited about leaving the perfection and goodness of heaven to come live in an imperfect world that's full of darkness and ran by Satan. A being that is full of holiness, leaving glory to come to a sinful, broken world. Why? Why did our King do that? A perfect being, the great I Am, shed perfection just to put on weakness. Why did he do that? I'll tell you why, okay? He wanted to understand our weaknesses just so that he could relate to us better. He wanted to understand our weaknesses in every way just so that he could love us better. I mean, that is the king that we fight for. A king that does whatever it takes just to be able to love us more and show us more love and understand us better. He felt pain so that he could understand why we cry. He suffered just so that he could understand why we give up. He gave up all of his divine privileges so that he could live in every way like us. He suffered more and overcame more than any of us ever will, yet without ever giving up, without ever messing up, and without ever sinning against us or himself. Real quick, I want to look at Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16 says, starting in verse 14 actually, it says, "So then, since we have a great high priest, who is Jesus, who has entered heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings that we do, yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it the most." So that's our King Jesus. He understands our weaknesses because he came down here and put on the weakness that we live in this flesh, and he was tested in every way as we are, yet he didn't sin. It says he denied all the pleasures of this world when he was here, that we all seem to chase after relentlessly, just so that he would be perfect in every way, just so that he could die for us. He remained perfect in every way so that when he went to the cross, he wouldn't have any of his own sins that he would have to pay for. Then and only then can he choose to take all of our sins in his own body on the cross and suffer in our place. Because if you don't have to suffer for any of your own sins, you can choose to suffer for other people. And that's what he did. He was perfect in every way, so he had nothing that he required to pay for, no sins he required to pay for, so he could pay for our own. Real quick, Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26 through 28. It says, "He is the kind of high priest that we need, because he is holy and blameless, unstained by sin. He has been set apart from sinners and has been given the highest place of honor in heaven. Unlike those other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices every day. They did this first for their own sins, and then for the sins of the people. So they had to pay for their own sins first, and then they could offer sacrifices for the sins of the people. But Jesus, he did this once for all when he offered himself as a sacrifice for the people's sins. The law appointed high priests who were limited by human weaknesses, but after the law was given, God appointed his one and only Son with an oath, and his Son has been made the perfect high priest forever for us. And he is the perfect high priest because he doesn't have any of his own sins to pay for, so he could offer himself for our sins for all time. And there's never a sacrifice now that has to be made because our King offered himself for us because he loves us. But how much did Jesus actually suffer for us? I mean, it's something that we can't really even wrap our minds around, but I want to try to help you understand in a little bit better way than just watching, the movie The Passion. I mean, physically we see that Jesus suffered a great deal. I mean, the physical pain that Jesus went through from the time that he was arrested until the time that he died on the cross can never really be over exaggerated. I mean, he went through a lot. I mean, we've all probably seen the movie The Passion of Christ, and the physical torture that the Jesus had to endure in that movie is tough for anyone to watch. I mean, it really is. He suffered physically pretty badly in that movie. But in all reality, what Jesus suffered the most wasn't even physical. It was emotional and mental and spiritual. And so we're going to look at some of these things. Okay, emotionally, Jesus suffered the loss of all of his closest friends, disciples, and family at the worst moment in his life. The moment he's arrested, everyone flees. And the way that he is arrested, betrayed by one of his own disciples, one that he discipled for 3 years, day and night, that lived side by side, one of his best friends, betrays him by an act of love, a kiss nonetheless. So that he just feels this betrayal. And then everyone deserts him and leaves him all alone. But the worst of all is his own Father turning his back on Jesus because Jesus is so full of sin, our sin, that he can't even look upon him. The Father tells Jesus that he must do this alone and experience the hell of living without his presence, the hell that we deserved. The emotional and mental anguish was so bad that Jesus cried out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus seen everything, all that he was about to suffer while he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. He seen that the physical pain of the lashes and the crown of thorns and the nails being driven through his hands. He seen the emotional anguish of being left to suffer completely alone, with no loved ones here on earth and no Father in heaven to feel anymore. And the mental anxiety of seeing the suffering that was coming on him was and still trying to find the strength to walk toward it was almost more than Jesus could take. I mean, understand this perfect unity that Jesus, the Father and the Son, have always shared. I mean, you can imagine how horrible it would be to feel, how horrible it would feel to lose that even for a second. This perfect unity that they've had from eternity past and up until this point, where they've always just been a perfect unity, always side by side. He doesn't know what it feels like to not have that. And the thought of losing that even for a second, the thought of it was just so horrifying that Jesus, he actually began to sweat drops of blood, it says, while crying out to the Father, asking for any other way to save us rather than this cup that he's about to drink. Because he knows it, he knows the suffering, he can see it, and he doesn't want to experience even a second without his Father. But even in the face of all that suffering, he said, if there was no other way, then he will carry out the Father's will and do what he must do in order to save us, in order for us to be able to have a relationship with him and to be with him in heaven one day. As bad as all of this physical, emotional, and mental anguish was that he endured for us, the spiritual suffering that he felt is something that we can't really comprehend or relate to at all. You know, I mean, imagine a perfect, completely sinless man, someone so perfect in every way that he doesn't even know what guilt feels like. He doesn't even know what a guilty conscience feels like. Not even the small guilt of telling a white lie, or coveting something that someone else has, or leading someone astray, or looking lustfully at a woman, or even feeling hate towards somebody. He has never felt guilt for anything in his life because he's never done anything wrong at all. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine that, you know? But now he has the sin of the entire world rushing onto him all at once. All sin of all time flooding his soul. I mean, sins like witchcraft, adultery, you know, murder, child molestation, rape, human trafficking, drug dealing, persecution, like every evil deed done since the beginning of creation until the end of the world. He feels all of this just flooding his soul all at the same time. I mean, what can we even compare to that? You know, there really isn't anything comparable. But, you know, we need something to wrap our minds around, because not ever feeling guilty isn't something that we can understand, especially since we sin so much every day that we've pretty much become numb to the guilt that we feel for small things anymore, you know. And so we can't imagine this guilt that he's feeling, you know, that he's never felt before. So this is the best illustration that I could come up with. And again, you know, trust that this is not comparable, but it's the best that I could do. So try to imagine a person that is this terrified of dirt and germs, you know, a germaphobe, if you will, you know, a germaphobe that lives in a bubble where everything is completely white, and he spends his day every day making sure that everything stays white and is perfectly spotless and clean. The air is perfectly filtered every day, everything perfectly sanitized. Then one day, out of nowhere, someone comes along, some filthy, disgusting man that stinks. He hasn't showered in years. He's full of leprosy and disease and snot dripping down his face, open scabs all over his body, and he breaks into the bubble. He chases the man down, the germaphobe. He tackles him. He tears off his clothes. He rapes him right there. And then he takes his body and he throws him in the city dump right on top of the biggest, most disgusting pile of trash full of dirty diapers and maggots everywhere. The anxiety and horror that this man felt in this moment, it doesn't even compare to what Jesus went through, a completely perfect man in every way when he took on the sin of the world. I mean, just think of that, you know, somebody that's so pure and holy in every way, getting flooded with sins that most of us would find disgusting. Jesus suffered physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually more than anyone could ever imagine, and he did it all for us, so that we could be with him one day. That's what love is. As if that wasn't enough, I mean, he continues to pursue us every day and bless us and fight for us still. The amount of love that Jesus has for each of us can't even be explained in human words. There's nothing to compare that to. We can't even comprehend that type of love. This is our King. This is the King that we fight for. And what does our King ask of us, though? You know, this King is worthy of anything that he wants from us. Because look at it. I mean, if soldiers will fight for a king they don't even know and doesn't even know them, how much more should we fight for a king that loves us and gave up all of that and suffered all those things just for us, just to free us from the slavery of our own flesh in this world and our sin, so that we could be with him one day and take the punishment that we deserved. This is what he asks for us, of us, as his soldiers. He asks for our unity. He says that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So he prays his final prayer for us to the Father before he is arrested in the garden. So John chapter 17, real quick, let's see here. It says, John 17, starting in verse 20 through 24. He says, And this is Jesus praying directly to the Father. He says, I'm praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. So he's praying for all of us, all Christians everywhere, because every single one of us came to believe in him through the message of his disciples, okay? Every single one of us, because we got the Bible through them. So this prayer is for all of us. He says, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you, and may they be in us, so that the world will believe that you sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, so they may be one, as we are one. I am in them, and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me, that you loved me, and that you love them as much as you love me. Father, I want these whom you have given me to be with me where I am. Then they can all see the glory that you gave me, because you loved me even before the world began. So this is Jesus' prayer for us, that we would all be in perfect unity, as him and the Father are in perfect unity, and through our unity, that the world will know that that God sent him, that he is the Messiah, and that we are his disciples. And the world will know that he loves us as he loves his own son, Jesus. So we ask for our unity. Otherwise, we will fall. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And we will not be able to show the world the glory of our King. So he also asks for our loyalty. He asks for our complete and undivided loyalty. Jesus does not want weak soldiers that are tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. He wants strong soldiers that are determined to fight for him no matter what, that cannot be bought by the things of this world and cannot be taken out so easily by the devil. He says that if you put your hand to the plow and look back, that you're not fit for the kingdom of heaven. He says that you must be willing to give up everything, or you cannot be my disciple. He says you must be so loyal to him that if you are lukewarm in your loyalty, he is going to spit you out of his mouth. He says, let the dead bury the dead. You come follow me. He asks you to take up your cross and follow him. He asks you to die to your old self and be reborn by the Spirit. He asks for your love, all of it. He says that you must love him with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. He says that you must love him so much that your love for your family, your wife, your mother and father, and even your own children will look like hate in comparison. He's not saying hate them. He's saying love him so much that in comparison, everything else doesn't even look like love anymore, because that love is so strong that you have for him. He asks for your time. He asks for a relationship with you. He says that he is standing at the door knocking. All you have to do is open the door and let him in, and he will come in and fellowship with you. He asks for you to empty yourself so that he can lift you up. He says that you must become less and less so that he can become greater and greater. He says that his power is in us is made perfect in our weakness. When we shed ourselves of our own pride and humble ourselves, he lifts us up, and his strength in us becomes perfect, and he is able to do great things through an empty vessel. He asks us to follow his commandments. He says, if you love me, you'll follow my commandments, and my commandments are not burdensome. He says, I give you these commandments so that your joy may be complete. It's for our benefit. He asks us to trust him. He tells us not to worry because he will take care of us. All we have to do is just seek him with everything, and he'll take care of everything else. He asks all of this from us, but puts his Spirit within us to do all the work for us. All we have to do is release control to him and trust to our King. Okay, our King only asks us to return the love that he has already shown us. 1 John 4:19 says that we love God only because he first loved us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since he died for us to save us from an eternity of suffering that we deserved, we should live for him. We were bought at a high price, the blood of our one and only King. This is our King, the one that shed his blood to save us, the one that we fight for in this spiritual battle. This is our King, and greater is he than he who is in the world, and he lives within us to help us in this battle. God bless you.